Seems to me the big advantage apps have is persistence when you're disconnected and persistent caching. And does anybody see anything happening in mobile web HTML5 where you can run a web page offline and have some degree of persistent caching so that you can do things like do your Zagat search and get your reviews without having a connection if you've cached that stuff previously? But the web could do it too with persistent caching.
Right.
With the right
Maybe you want to
technology.
just repeat that question real quick. It's just basically the advantage of an app is it continues working even after you've lost the connection.
Right, and the web can with the right technology.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely something we're looking at. We're looking a lot at HTML. I've seen some HTML5 demos that really look like apps. I mean, you're right, it's one of the big advantages of an app. There's other advantages too, app over mobile web that I didn't mention. I mean, the fact is the client app can integrate with other software on the device. So in terms of functionality, if it's important to integrate with email, integrate with calendar, integrate with Google Maps, you can definitely offer a much more robust feature set with an app. But you're absolutely right. But that's one of the reasons we're looking very closely at HTML5 now. And then you have the possibility of what we call hybrid apps or shell apps, where there is a downloadable client, but in effect the app contains a mini browser. So it's the best of both worlds. Now you have to be a little careful with this because Apple is going to reject something that is nothing more than a browser shell. But if you can add a certain functionality on the client side. As a matter of fact, I mentioned we are launching today an SI Fantasy Football app that is in fact a hybrid app that we're launching on Android today.
There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Bharat Ramani from Great Connections. What do you see, will mobile turn into a learning platform at some point in time?
Education.
Learning platform.
Yes.
So funny you should say that. I was just with the enterprise group yesterday in San Francisco discussing exactly that. So I think you're going to see, from the university perspective, I'm not sure. I have not spent the time there. It seemed to lend itself towards the universities, but I think from an enterprise perspective, it'll be one of the early mobile services you start to see within enterprises where management teams, sales management can communicate with the sales force, or field technicians can be communicated back with their folks who are, these are the new parts that are available. Here's how you fix that particular problem. And so I think you'll see the enterprise segment make their kind of early moves into mobile in this kind of one-to-many training to their employees. In terms of universities, again, it just seems to be a natural. The demographic skews heavily towards those types of individuals. So I think it's probably you'll see more and more of this type of thing probably in the next 6 months.
I just want to say, just to give you an idea, I went to a presentation at an unnamed but pretty well established university, since one of my kids went to college this year. And we went to the journalism department. And the first complaint was they had too many staff. Gee, I wonder where they all came from. But they were ex-journalists that basically got a job in academia. The point about it is this, that in the presentation, they showed an Apple, some presentation of a Mac, and they couldn't get it to work quite right. So I rest my case. They did not get my $160,000 because if the professor doesn't know how to use the basic tool of their profession, I don't think it's going to teach my kids much. I would say that the universities are not going to get it right now because they're still employing their pals from the last wave of layoffs. But the next bunch of people, probably trade schools, probably businesses, that can't afford to have a professor to go on a client site, but if they take a pad, remember, it has eyes. That means that everybody in the company could see whatever the field technician is looking at. I can't emphasize this enough. You don't realize how potent these things are. I did a story. I was walking down the street and there was an accident. And I wanted my daughter to write a story about it for the newspaper. So I called the newspaper and said, I saw an interesting accident. And they said, well, can you take a picture? And I said, well, she's not here with the camera, but I took it with my droid. And they published it, and it was an excellent picture. And what it was is there was an accident with a canine policeman got into an accident, and they immediately whisked him off to the hospital, but they forgot to check the dog in the back. And there was this giant dog in the back, and it couldn't get it out, and nobody, so there was like, I had a picture of about 12 firemen and cops standing around and scratching their heads, trying to figure out how to get this dog out the back because it was huge and was upset. And I'm saying it all happened with the smartphone. The point is that you don't realize how powerful these things are, and academia is probably not going to do it. So you have to look at the people that are really on point, that could go to an oil refinery and actually hold up a smartphone and look at the wells. You want to know about the pipelines? I guarantee you that somebody will be going around with a smartphone looking at all the gas lines that have leaky wells. Take my word. Okay, go on.
The critic Neil Postman said that in the electronic universe, we live in a state of continuous partial attention. And this was true with the web. With mobile, it's becoming even more accelerated, where the level of fragmentation of your attention is now to the point where, if we look at John's magazines, maybe people are going to read one article rather than two. We're going to be looking at a situation where everything is a series of sequence fragments. So my question is, I didn't hear any of you talk about the downsides of this, and the downsides are necessary if you're going to re-engineer a better content experience, if you're really going to improve the quality of how people experience content on these things. So I would be interested if any of you have any sense of how you're going to create a holistic experience that isn't just a series of random punches from 1, 2, 3 on.
Okay, good point. So basically, the reading experience is going to change. And as we understand, the problem is that people are just going to specific articles. So how do you put it all together so that when people go to a mobile reading experience of Time Magazine and New York Times, what have you, how's it really going to work so it's beneficial to you, but also works for the reader? Do we have an answer? It's a big one.
Yeah, I could speak to that. Well, it's as I mentioned, publishers, we're much more focused on iPads and tablets than the broadcast companies. I mean, for example, CNN does not even have an iPad application out yet. They're working on one, but not out yet. When you see the number of magazines that have launched iPad versions, so why is this? All you need to do is look at Apple's advertising campaign. How many of you have seen the advertisements leaning back with the iPad with the feet up? You know, Steve Jobs made a big point of sitting back in that comfy chair on stage when he introduced the iPad. Magazine advertisements, we're seeing the feet up all over the place. A very clear message, this is a lean back device, and this is a huge sea change because I'd suggest that all of digital, whether it's desktop or mobile, has been a lean forward experience. And I think the type of fragmentation you're talking about is related to the lean forward experience. How do we use desktop? How do we use mobile? We're looking for a piece of information. I'm looking for driving directions. I'm looking for what the weather is. I'm looking for how my stocks did, how my teams did. That's why we have never, as I mentioned, put magazines per se on the 3-inch screen. iPad is something else altogether. I really believe it is a game changer in terms of introducing digital to a lean back experience, and magazines are inherently immersive lean back experiences. So the curated editorial experience, as opposed to throwing everything up on a web page, leaving the user to his own devices to search and find.
We have another question. I just want to say real quick, if you think about it, just put it all together, these devices give us the opportunity to say, tell me what I need to know for this moment in time. And if you think about what newspapers and magazines are, is that they are curated, they're edited by the writer and the editor for a whole mass of people. But every reader goes to an article somewhat differently. If you're into food and you read a food article, you want to know how it was made and who made it. If you just like to eat, you want to know where you can buy it. And what I would argue that what this calls for is a mass personalized editorial viewpoint. So every reader suddenly sees the world pretty much from their point of view. Not totally, but enough that it makes a difference. So this information becomes more relevant, and then the publication will have to work harder for you to deliver you this level of intelligence. I believe that's how it's going to change. I would also say that in live experiences, You know, if I spend $50 and go to all the trouble to go watch a football game or something, I might actually like to pay another $5 to get the highlights of that game to take home with me and to go and boast the next day around the water cooler. To, look what I saw last night. Maybe they throw a picture of me here with the quarterback. I don't know. So, something to think about. Go ahead, Allison.
What are the top resources that you turn to for mobile industry, whether it's on devices, apps, what's going on in the industry?
Where do you get the industry information from?
Yeah, where do you-
The inside dope. Well, first of all, the iBreakfast, obviously. Okay, go ahead. Where do you get your, where
Mobile
do you get the inside dope?
marketer, MobileQA News.
Fierce.
Fierce Wireless.
Did you get that?
Yeah.
TechCrunch. Was it Fierce Wireless? Fierce Wireless. And I think the guys at Google have a little bit of inside information. So direct from the source.
What was the second one you said, mobile marketer and?
MobileQA News.
MoCo News.
MoCo's part of paid content, actually.
In the back. I think this will be our last question.
As far as content on the mobile device versus they talk about print and stuff like this, how vital do you all believe the content has to be livened up, interactive, a greater experience than than the book itself? And if it does have to become more of an interactive, for example, someone reads a cartoon, a comic, read it on the device, does the comic have to come alive? Does it have to be audio? Do the characters have to talk? Do you believe it has to become almost a hybrid between television, movies, print, that it's now a totally different type of media experience than you've ever had before, or you're going to lose the so-called viewer? Where do you think?
How does this thing all shape up? And probably inherent in this is how is the older media reordered?
So I would say no, you don't have to go to that extreme. I mean, if you look at a Kindle, just the ability to look up a word with the press of the, whatever you call that thing, the little cursor, is huge. I mean, I never would stand up, go to a dictionary to figure out a word. I just keep going. Years and years of doing this, right? My vocabulary shrank every year that I was alive. Now you can actually look up a word. So whether the photograph comes alive or not, that's a better experience for me, even on my device with a kind of a cruddy backlight functionality. Anything above that is gravy, and that's my opinion, but I don't think you need to go to that extreme to make it a better experience.
Yeah, let me add a little bit to that.
I would completely agree with that. I just read, and now I can't remember his name, but a very well-established internet design guru said the beauty of the iPad is that it's a connected device that doesn't feel connected. So it allows you to get immersed in that material. So I agree. I don't think we need to go too crazy with rich media. I would suggest that even a more important potential that we haven't begun to leverage is social networking. Because here, what's the big difference between reading a book or a magazine on an iPad versus print? The big difference is this book or magazine knows that I'm reading it, knows where I am in space and time, knows where I am in the publication, and knows who else is reading this publication. You talk about learning. The opportunities for learning on an iPad. How about a text how about a digital textbook that is also a study group for that book? How about I'm reading a book that is also a book club? How popular are book clubs? How long have book clubs been around? So I don't think we've begun to scratch the surface in these kinds of opportunities. I would point you to Flipbook to see a glimpse of some of the kinds of things I'm talking about.
Okay, it depends on the medium. It depends on the actual product. The main differentiations I've learned from all the Comic-Con companies that are putting their comic books online run something like this. Movies are a completely passive experience. You cannot stop a movie seamlessly and get more information. You could, but it spoils the flow. So literature exists within the space of where you run it. And that seems